America is the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our special The Russia Hoax Reckoning. Maybe you didn't follow every single day over the last, 9 years now about all this Russia stuff. But of course you remember Russia. You remember hearing Trump talk about it. But now we have a major, I would say, update to the story. So now it's time to get boned up on exactly what happened and get caught up, so that as more details emerge from Tulsi Gabbard, our new Director of National Intelligence, we know what's going on and we know how serious this in fact is. Now, someone called into my Sirius XM radio show the other day and they said, Slater, the word hoax isn't maybe the best word for this. The word hoax has kind of like this little maybe like insinuation of like silliness or something not that important, like the Jussie Smollett hoax. This is much worse than that. This was an Obama criminal conspiracy. The attempted coup from the outgoing Obama administration to either prevent or destroy the Trump presidency. Now, we're going to get into great detail of this. We'll go over all the people, all the characters. You'll know, like there may be this scene, like if you're an actor and you're coming into a scene, you walk in and you're like, wait, who's who? Who are the bad guys? Who are the good guys? What do you want? What's happening in the scene here? So we'll make sure if you're walking kind of in the middle of all this, that you're all caught up on what exactly is going on. My job before we get to those guests is to take us back in time, a little reminiscing on how much, and may we never forget, how much the left was freaking out that Donald Trump won the election in 2016. Never forget the absolute level of freakout. So out of that, it doesn't seem so crazy after all that the outgoing president used his power not to influence a foreign government, but to use our own intel agencies against the American people and undermine a duly elected president. And duly elected, it doesn't matter to them because they hated him so much. Never forget what America was like. I mean, this all really, some of the emails that we're going to be talking about later was December 2016, just 2 months after the election. That election was a shock to the world. Hillary's team they were still paying the bills on the glass-ceilinged convention center in New York City for the party that never was. The panic, the pain, the screaming into the wind. Everyone remembers that lady. I'd love to get an update on that lady you guys just showed the video of. Like, I'd be curious, like, what's she up to these days? What are you doing? Lady? Guy? I don't really know. But what is that person? But don't forget that. Right? That was like people I knew too. Like family members were that. For me. Screaming into the wind. These people with that level of hatred would do anything to undermine Trump. Anything that was in their power was within their power. So never underestimate the hatred that these people seethed with and still do against Donald Trump. A seething hatred, an all-consuming hatred. Rosie O'Donnell can't even be in the same country anymore. She had to leave. Families were broken up. People can't even talk to their own family members. Level of frothing hatred, rabid, convulsing, can't sleep at night, need to go to therapy. Shave my head. Just this hatred just constantly churning in my bowels level of hatred for this man, Donald Trump. So, yeah, to come up with something to undermine his presidency? Of course. I'm surprised that's all they did, as bad as it is. Now, I remember when Russia collusion and, Trump and others saying, it's a hoax. In my mind, when I heard that, I thought, okay, this was a story. The story that Russia colluded with Trump to win the election. Okay? I thought that story was a rationale from the Hillary campaign. Right? You do your after action report. What happened? How did we lose? Of course, they couldn't admit that she was a terrible candidate and no one likes her, or that Trump was a great candidate and had better ideas and better reflected the desires of the American people after the failures of the previous 8 years of the Obama administration. Like, no way could that ever be the answer as to what happened. So I thought maybe the Hillary campaign came up with Russia collusion as a an explainer to what happened. Okay, that'd be one thing. And then they just ran with it. Or maybe this was made up by the executives at CNN or the Democratic Party. And it's all the same, right? But similar ideas, similar reasons, like how could this have happened? Oh, he couldn't have won on his own merits. We're not that wicked and evil of a country. It must have been Russia. Okay. Turns out it was much worse than that. It was our own CIA, who's had their own foreign adventures over the years. But never like this have they turned against the American people. Why? They did it. They came up with this story of Russia collusion for the purpose of giving it to the media. We'll talk about the timeline later. So that the media could run with it. And they did, right away. So that they could say stuff like this. So that Hillary could say stuff like this. This was CBS. Before we play this, pay attention to all the jump cuts. All right, every time the camera switches to a new camera, if you notice in this show, no jump cuts. Stays on me the whole time. No edits. CBS, editing all the time. Anytime they jump to a new camera angle or they move over to Jane Pauley going, yes, oh, interesting. They edited something out of what Hillary said. So notice all the jump cuts in this 42-second clip.
I believe he knows he's an illegitimate president. He knows that there were a bunch of different reasons why the election turned out the way it did. And I take responsibility for those parts of it that I should. But Jane, it was like applying for a job and getting 66 million letters of recommendation and losing to a corrupt human tornado. And so I know that he knows that this wasn't on the level. I don't know that we'll ever know everything that happened, but clearly we know a lot and are learning more every day, and history will probably sort it all out. So of course he's obsessed with me, and I believe that it's a guilty conscience.
13 jump cuts. I counted 13 in 42 seconds. That's like Coco Melon level jump cuts. Real quick sidebar on the jump cuts. So Zohran Mamdani, his campaign videos, if you ever watch them, there's just as many jump cuts. That's for Coco Melon reasons, right? Where the people at Coco Melon realize that if you do a jump cut every 2 seconds, you'll keep the attention of stupid little toddlers because that's all their attention span is. They can't focus on anything else, so you just got to keep changing that on them. And that's what Zohran does. That's not what CBS did, right? CBS did that to edit stuff out. And we'll never know what Hillary actually said in those clips. But the whole point was to say he's illegitimate. The GOP put out a 42-minute montage of Democrats, prominent Democrats, Obama-level cabinet members, talking about how he's illegitimate. Here's how Hillary put it in that same interview.
When the President of the United States, who has taken an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, and by that, defend the American people and their interests, uses his position to, in effect, extort a foreign government for his own political purposes, I think that is very much what the founders worried about in high crimes and misdemeanors.
She's a liar and she knew it. So, more about that in a minute. He's an illegitimate president claim. One last point, just to set the stage. Do you remember during Trump's 2016 campaign, at a lot of these rallies, the people would start this lock her up chant. Remember that? Lock her up, lock her up. All right, so Trump wins. What does he do? Did he lock her up? No. This is a Politico article from just after the election. President Trump said he's not interested in pursuing case against Hillary Clinton. It says President-elect Donald Trump conceded Tuesday that he probably won't make good on his campaign pledge to pursue a new criminal investigation into his political rival Hillary Clinton. Quote, "It's just not something that I feel very strongly about." And then he was asked about his base. Like, oh, won't your base be upset? He said, I don't think they'll be disappointed. I think I will explain it that we in many ways will save our country. And he said prosecuting Clinton would be very, very divisive for our country. He said he didn't want to hurt the Clintons. He said, quote, "I'm not looking to go back and go through this." He said the Clintons are, quote, "good people, and I don't want to hurt them." How did she and how did the entire left repay his magnanimity? How did they repay his kindness? By trying to destroy his business, take all of his money, and throw him in jail for 90 years. What they did not foresee is that President Trump would ever have power again and be able to take another crack at it. Here's what he said at a recent event.
The witch hunt that you should be talking about is they caught President Obama absolutely cold, Tulsi Gabbard. What they did to this country in 2016, starting in 2016, but going up all the way going up to 2020 in the election. They tried to rig the election and they got caught. And there should be very severe consequences for that. You know, when we caught Hillary Clinton, I said, you know what? Let's not go too far here. It's the ex-wife of a president, and I thought it was sort of terrible. And I let her off the hook, and I'm very happy I did. But it's time to start, after what they did to me, and whether it's right or wrong, it's time to go after people. Obama's been caught directly. So people say, oh, you know, a group. It's not a group. It's Obama. His orders are on the paper. The papers are signed. The papers came right out of their office. They sent everything to be highly classified. Well, the highly classified's been released. And what they did in 2016 and in 2020 is very criminal. It's criminal at the highest level.
First of all, calling Hillary the ex-wife of a former president is great. But did you catch the key line? After what they did to me. We know what Trump did in 2017 with Hillary. Nothing. But 2024 now is very different than 2017. I think of it as the final scene of The Lion King, which is actually Hamlet, but let's just use The Lion King instead. So Scar, of course, betrays the family, kills Mufasa. Simba goes away. Simba comes back when he's older. Scar tries to kill Simba, but Simba's able to turn the tables on him, right? So we'd play the scene here, but it's like copyright rules, we can't do it. So to try to jog your memory here, it's right at the end, there's the Pride Rock and there's fire everywhere. And Scar is now hanging, or he's right on the edge of the cliff. He's standing right on the edge of the cliff. He's got nowhere to go, and here's Simba right in front of him, ready to back him up off the cliff, right? Into the fire below. But then Scar has this change of heart. Scar gets down all meek and timid and begs for forgiveness. Oh, Simba, oh, please, don't kill me, Simba. And Simba says, fine, I'll let you live. But leave here and never return. And Scar slithers away. And then once he's now free and standing behind Simba in a final act of betrayal, he slaps the ground and smashes these ashes, these burning ashes into Simba's face. And then when Simba's distracted, Scar jumps on top of him again and tries to kill him. Trump let Hillary go, just like Simba let Scar go. Trump let Hillary go with the message, go away, go very far away, and don't ever come back. You can go do your silly Clinton Foundation stuff. Good luck getting any donations. But go away and don't ever come back. They did come back. And they tried to put him in jail multiple times. And they tried to undermine his entire presidency. You think Trump forgot this? No. She never went away. And now he has the opportunity to throw all of them over the cliff into the flames below again. I imagine, let me stop here because we got some great guests here, but I just imagine Trump's political decision making, and this is all done in an instant, right? But he's got like this formula in his brain. It's like Goodwill Hunting, like this big complicated mathematical formula. And Trump's instantly able to figure out what to do with this formula. But maybe in the past, part of the formula equation was like E equals what my enemies would think about it, right? That's been removed from the equation. There's no more E. It doesn't matter what his enemies think. He's, right? You see it with deporting. Oh, should we deport everyone? I don't know. My enemies won't think that. It doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't give a rip. Trump maybe said, oh, you can't go after Obama. Oh, you can't go after Obama. He was a former president. It's like, so was I. these people won't stop until they're stopped.
One of the central foundation stones of a democracy is the idea that you do not allow the politicization of the criminal justice system, the intelligence system, the military, right? That is stuff that you keep out of politics, right? Because it's too dangerous.
Wow, when he said that, he knew exactly what he did. That's amazing. There's no one better to talk about this than Hans Mahncke. He's the author of Swift Voting America, Exposing the Russiagate Fraud from the Steele Dossier to the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane Investigation. Hans, thank you for being here. That's a pretty wild clip, isn't it? Because Obama, that was 2020. He knew what he did.
He knew what he did,
from the beginning? Can you start from the beginning? I don't know where the beginning is, but start
Sure.
from the beginning and bring us up to now.
Sure. The beginning that is documented, obviously we don't know what happened in some back room in 2013, 14, whatever. But in terms of stuff that's documented, where we have emails, documents, and so on, there's an email from within the Clinton campaign from February 2016, where they discussed this project to smear Trump. And as it turns out, that was the project that Trump was colluding with Russia. And they called it the Swift Boat Project. Hence, my book is called Swift Boating America. So that's what we know, February 2016. The Clinton campaign then did a whole number of things. They hired Christopher Steele. They hired this guy called Mark Elias, this Democrat lawyer who sort of ran this thing behind the scenes. They pushed information into the FBI. They hired Nellie Orr, who's this wife of one of the top DOJ officials. I mean, a lot of things going on, but this was all on the Clinton side. Now, at some point, and we are not entirely sure when, but probably around July of 2016, the government comes in and sort of takes over the Clinton hoax. So it was a Clinton hoax, and the government said, okay, we're going to weaponize this against Trump. We're going to do this sort of in tandem to Clinton. And then after she lost in November, it was just the government. So it was just the government pushing this hoax. So that's sort of the rough timeline.
Okay, that's really important to know. Can we go over some people?
Sure.
Who were the government people? Because I don't care if Hillary does it. That's campaign stuff, all right. But let's go over some government people. So who were the main people that in the government who took it over from her?
Probably we have to put John Brennan, the CIA director, at the top of that pyramid. Now, people say Obama, and obviously John Brennan isn't going to do anything, especially not anything illegal, as he did, and lie about it and so on, unless he had the go-ahead from Obama. So I think we can take that as a given. But in terms of things we can actually prove, where there's a paper trail, I'd put Brennan at the top of that pyramid of people who did really bad things. Now, his involvement started in July of 2016. Again, that's documented. Maybe it started earlier, but in terms of us having proof of it. And what happened was that the U.S. intelligence services got a tip that the Russians had found out that this entire Russia collusion scheme was a Clinton campaign plot. So they'd overheard some Clinton people talking about it. So basically, the Russians knew that the whole thing was a hoax. And then Brennan found out, so Brennan knew that the Russians knew. So Brennan told Obama, and then they all knew. The only people who didn't know were the Trump campaign. So they all knew this was a Clinton campaign hoax. And instead of basically ignoring it or telling Hillary to cut it out, because of course this is very dangerous when you paint your opponent as a Russian agent, or doing anything like that, investigating Hillary. I mean, many options on the table at that point in time. Again, July of 2016. But Brennan did none of those things. Brennan and Obama, and then in very short order, FBI Director James Comey as well, all of these guys went after Trump. So they weaponized what they knew was a Clinton campaign hoax, and they knew the Russians knew, which is sort of the irony here, against Trump. So they kind of doubled down on the Hillary hoax. And that's sort of that's what we're hearing right now about all these new documents coming out that that shows that that actually happened, and we have proof of those things. Now we did have one document that came out many years ago that proved that Brennan knew, and yet he pushed this hoax against Trump, and that Obama knew, and so on. But right now, in the last week, this week, and so on, we're finding out a lot more of the details of what exactly happened back then in July of 2016.
Okay, so John Brennan was the head of the CIA at the time. What crime is this? We can talk about wrong and moral. What crime was committed?
So there's a number of options. Now, first of all, I would guard against getting too excited about any of this, because we've had so many false alarms where, people are going to get arrested, people are going to get charged, and so on. And it's been, what, 9, almost 10 years, and nothing's happened. So first of all, I'm kind of pessimistic, but maybe slightly more optimistic than usual because of these new documents. So what are they going to charge them with? Maybe let's start with where. I think the where is more important than the what. Because if you charge them in DC, which is where Clinton's campaign lawyer, a guy called Michael Sussman, was charged with lying to the FBI. This is a few years back. And the jury just laughed it out of court. In fact, the jury later on said, we're not going to convict Clinton's campaign lawyer. It's just not going to happen. If you charge in DC, you're better off just not charging at all. It's a total joke. Don't do that. Also, don't charge in Northern Virginia, because it's more or less the same thing. It's a suburb of DC. So that is, I'd say, the most important thing. Charge it in places like, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Florida, maybe, and find creative ways of taking your cases there. Democrats always do that. They always take their cases to other jurisdictions. They find ways. So I think that's number one. Now, in terms of what you charge them with, I mean, the most obvious one, the one that all the Trump people were charged with, is lying. That's 18 U.S.C. 1001, lying in a matter concerning the government, like lying to an FBI agent, lying to, in anything to do with the government. In this case, it would be lying to Congress, because a lot of these people, Comey, Brennan, and so on, they were called to testify, and we can now prove. We have all the evidence, we have all the documents to prove that they lied to Congress. And so that's the most obvious one. The one I'd probably prefer personally is the conspiracy, because you had more people doing this. And the reason why conspiracy is probably better than lying in terms of the charges is because conspiracy, you don't have the clock running out. On lying, the clock runs out after 5 years. So if you haven't charged them within 5 years, you can never charge them again after the date they lied. On conspiracy, the clock keeps getting renewed. Anytime anyone does anything to further the conspiracy, the clock starts again. So you get another 5 years, another 5 years. So you don't have the problem with the clock running out. And what's the conspiracy? Well, there's a conspiracy statute to defraud the United States. So basically, you are preventing the United States government from its normal functioning. That's the broad statute. And that's the one I probably go for here, because what they did in making up this intelligence and lying about what they knew and going after Trump and weaponizing lies against Trump, accusing him of being a Russian agent, he was at first the candidate for president, and then he was the actual president. And if you do that, you are most definitely obstructing the proper functioning of the US government. So that's the one that I'd focus on.
Yes. Great. Let's go over a couple of other people. So we talked about former then head CIA, John Brennan. What about the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper? What's his role in this?
He, we don't hear about him as much because his role was kind of more of a conduit in the background. So he doesn't appear in these documents as sort of the main character. So in some of these new documents, Brennan is literally suppressing intelligence. He's literally promoting fake intelligence. He's doing those things. With Comey, we have the exact same evidence. For Clapper, we do not have something that's quite on that level. But what we do have for Clapper, again, as Director of National Intelligence, he was sort of the nerve center of all these things. But in my view, he wasn't so much of the brains behind it. Nominally, he was the nerve center, but I think the other ones were not that he wasn't running the show, but they were running the show more than him. But what we do have with him is, again, the false statements, where he would come out afterwards, and there's a lot of clips of him, both in sort of testifying to Congress, things like that, as well as just in media, where he just outright lies about all this stuff and pushes this Trump-Russia collusion hoax, which he knew to be false. So Not a reason not to go after him, but I'd certainly put Brennan and Comey higher up on the list of targets.
Well, let's talk about Comey. So FBI Director James Comey, what was his role in it?
Right. So he was, his role was as the CIA cannot get involved in domestic politics by law, which, by the way, they did. So that's not good. And that's something that needs to be looked at. But in terms of trying to give this the color of, something legitimate, what they did is they outsourced this investigation to the FBI. So at that point, Comey took it over. And that's something called the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. So after Brennan, Comey, and Obama, what we just talked about in July of 2016, knew that this was a Hillary Clinton campaign hoax, they decided what we're going to have to do is go after Trump. And the guy who's going to do it is Comey, because he's the head of the FBI, and that's the agency who's allowed to do these things. They're allowed to investigate these domestic matters. So they started this fraudulent investigation called Crossfire Hurricane, and Comey ran the whole thing. And Comey covered up a lot of things to do with it. So, for instance, they found out, we haven't talked about the Steele dossier yet. So they found out very quickly that the Steele dossier was a total fraud. Comey covered that up. He personally covered it up. He went and lied about the fact that it was a total fraud, not just to media, to President Trump, to Congress, to all kinds of people on all kinds of levels at all kinds of different times. So basically, he was running the domestic investigation, the fraudulent one. But kind of Brennan was sitting, I'd say, one notch higher than him, because he had initiated this whole thing. It's only, as I mentioned, as a CIA director, he couldn't get involved in a direct investigation on a domestic matter.
Okay, we're going to have to do a lightning round. We got about 3 minutes. I got a couple more names I want to run through. You mentioned the Steele dossier. Can you give us the quick on that? And then Peter Strzok and Lisa Page.
Sure. Steele dossier is a dossier of a number of reports, so the number varies between 15 and 18, compiled by a guy called Christopher Steele. He's a British guy, and he was hired by the Clinton campaign to write this dossier to expose Trump as a Russian agent or as colluding with Russia. Now, as has been shown, the entire thing was made up. This guy just made it up. He literally just made up stories out of thin air and just put them on a piece of paper. Like, it says that we've all heard about the P tape story, that Trump was in Moscow and he peed on some prostitutes. I mean, totally ridiculous stories. The thing is absolutely filled to the brim with those kinds of stories, totally fake. But I think the main point for people to take away from this is that the government, the FBI, the CIA, everyone knew that this thing is totally fake, and they still ran with it anyway. Peter Strzok was the lead FBI investigator. So a moment ago, we talked about Comey having to kind of take the lead on the investigation because that's what the FBI does. So that was kind of his task in this conspiracy. And his man that he tasked to do that on the ground was this guy, Peter Strzok. So he was the head of counter-espionage at the FBI, and he was a rabid anti-Trump guy, completely biased, totally focused on making sure Trump does not get elected, and after Trump got elected, making sure that Trump's presidency is totally sabotaged. So a completely biased guy who was in charge of the investigation. And Lisa Page was his supposed lover within the FBI. So she was an FBI lawyer. In fact, she was the lawyer for the FBI's deputy director, a guy called Andrew McCabe. So in a sense, you had this sort of connection between the chief investigator, Peter Strzok, and the top level of the FBI, what they call the seventh floor, where those two are constantly chatting about this case. And in fact, Lisa Page was probably even more Trump deranged than Peter Strzok. So she kept pushing him about making sure that Trump isn't elected. And Peter Strzok was very happy to oblige. And that's how these guys got famous. So there's these text messages where they talk about making sure that Trump doesn't get elected. And Peter Strzok, again, this is the chief investigator, says, no, we'll make sure he doesn't get elected. And then they talk about this insurance policy where if for some reason he does get elected, they have an insurance policy, which, as we now know, was tying this whole Russia collusion thing around his neck so that he couldn't govern properly, and then get a special counsel and try and get rid of him that way. So they had all this laid out, and all of this is evident through their text messages, which we've seen. There are thousands and thousands of them between these two lovers, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page.
Amazing. If I had to pick one more name, Michael Flynn. What's the deal with Michael Flynn and his role in this, and why the left wanted to take him out?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a tragic story. So Michael Flynn was an advisor to then candidate Trump in 2016. And in fact, before that, he had been the head of military intelligence under Obama. So he'd sort of switched sides in a way. And he's a very loyal guy, knew exactly where all the bodies were buried, exactly the kind of guy you want to have with you, especially as a kind of first term president, as Trump was at the time. And they took him out immediately. They made up, he became national security advisor under Trump, but he only remained in that position for about 3 weeks because they took him out immediately. They accused him of lying about his contacts with with the Russian ambassador in Washington, D.C. As it turns out, many, many years later, when we actually got the transcripts of his communications, of his calls with the Russian ambassador, there was nothing wrong with what he did. In fact, he didn't lie about it. Everything he told was the truth. So they just absolutely smeared this guy, got him fired. And then, of course, that created lots of huge problems for Trump, not only in terms of the perception of, oh, you had to fire your national security advisor because of, Russia collusion, but also because he didn't have Flynn around for the next 4 years to advise him about, where the bodies are buried and how these things work. And if Flynn had been there in early 2017, none of this would have happened because everything that's coming out now, he would have known where to look for it.
Great point. Okay, hey, we have to go. Hans, I hope we can talk again. Thank you for writing your book about this, so people are way ahead of it, but still not too late to get caught up. Swift Boating America. Give me the 30-second pitch as to why this matters and why this is beyond just politics or something. Why is this such a big deal?
I think it's such a huge deal because you had one party, and it happened to be the governing party, accusing the other party's candidate of being an agent of Russia. And that is so dangerous. It's not your run-of-the-mill kind of campaign smear where, they say they had an affair or, the little usual stuff. It is so dangerous because it goes straight to the heart of national security. When you do that, you put everything in jeopardy. And this is exactly how it played out. Everything that happened in terms of criminalizing diplomacy with Russia. Trump had a great shot of making peace with Russia back in 2016-17. Never happened because of this hoax. Then you slide into the Ukraine war. Would have never happened without this hoax. Then Russia becomes China's best friend. Would have never happened without this hoax. So we could go through the whole list, but I'd say it's the national security and the geopolitical implications of the whole hoax that are really the biggest reason why this matters.
Hans Mahncke, Mahncke, Swift Boating America is the book. Hans, thank you for all your work on this.
Thanks for having me.